How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today we're going to be taking a look at Junji Ito Maniac, Season 1, Episode 8, and this one's entitled Layers of Fear and the Thing That Drifted Ashore. This is obviously based on manga by Junji Ito, and sadly, neither of these stories have an official release in the States at this time. Here's hoping that changes in the future. However, these are both very famous Junji Ito stories, and let's just say that a lot of people in the States have still read them. Anyway, this episode, you do see Junji Ito's creativity shining through, and they're both good stories, but both of these aren't the best adaptations, and it is, ironically, for the same reason. It's because the original art was a little bit too complex, and, you know, Junji Ito, he sits down and he draws an amazingly creepy image. He draws one, and that's hard enough, but with animation, you have to do 24 a second. So doing complex things is always harder in animation, and with the aid of computers nowadays, it's a little bit easier, but still, having a complex piece of original source art is always going to be hard to transfer over. In Layers of Fear, it's this really good, interesting body horror, and I won't spoil it, but it leads to a climax that in the original manga is absolutely grueling and hard to get through. It is this painful read. Each panel is just awful, but in an intentionally good way. You know, I'm not saying it's bad, I'm saying it's gut-wrenching, but it's supposed to be, you know? And in the show, it just kind of goes quick. It feels too easy, because this is lots and lots of detail, and they have to kind of glide over it, and it takes this gut-wrenching scene at the end and kind of just goes way too smooth and quick. And it's kind of the same for the thing that drifted ashore. The creature in the original manga has a really complex face. Big bulbs with things sticking out of them, and a whole bunch of weird feelers and little lights and stuff. It's absolutely creepy, but because animation is hard, let's try to avoid looking at the creature's face too often. That becomes a problem. But the end, and again I won't spoil it, does feature a very complex image. And yeah, it doesn't look as good in animation. So yeah, these stories are both okay. I don't want to say they're the worst thing ever. And with adaptations, most of the time, you're not going to be as good as your source material. A lot of Junji Ito adaptations, be it live-action movies or animation, usually do have this problem. But the thing is, I notice it here a little bit more than I did in other episodes. Obviously, I would always recommend the original manga over the adaptations, but here it's just noticed a little more. I don't want to say they're terrible, and I don't want to say it's the worst thing ever, but yeah, a little bit too complex for animation here. But Junji Ito's creativity and story ideas do still shine through, but this isn't the best one, and it's kind of sad because they are classic stories, but it's still fine. Let's go ahead and talk a little deeper about each story. I'll be talking about the plots, but I'll be avoiding the major spoilers, so don't worry about that. But I do want to dig in for a little bit deeper of an analysis. In Layers of Fear, we open up with this prologue. There's a team of archaeologists, and they notice a pattern that looks like a human face in the sand. They dig down into the center of the head, and they find a baby's skull. And it turns out that the guy has a theory that when they did this tomb, they put the baby on the ground, the dead one, hopefully it was dead at the time, and they put layers of dirt on top of each other, which would eventually create the statue of the giant baby. So, layers of fear. The first instance of layers here. We cut to the future, and the archaeologist's father is dead, but it's been around 20 years or so, and his wife is still around with his 2 daughters, and it's a complex family situation to say the least. It turns out the younger daughter used to be a bit of an actress. She was in commercials, she did some modeling, she was semi-famous, but decided that life wasn't for her, and in turn, most of their lives growing up, the mother focused on the younger daughter and not the older one. And you do get a bit of guilt, and you do get a bit of an evil mother. And the mother is really evil, and you look at her and you're like, I can't believe she did that. But knowing real horror stories of real evil mothers, especially dealing with ones that are trying to make their kids famous, it's a totally believable evil mother. I just want to say that. But we get things like the daughter feeling guilty that she quit being an actress. And the thing is, she was kind of forced into that decision when she was young, and now that she's grown up, she realized it's not the life she wanted. So she shouldn't feel any guilt in having quit, because it really wasn't what she wanted to do with her life. But the mother spent so much time investing in her, trying to get her to do that and get her to have a successful career, that it feels like she threw away something the mother gave her, even though, again, it's not what she wanted to do and should have freedom in her life. But on top of that, the mother kind of abandoned the older daughter because she wasn't the pretty and talented one, and in turn, all growing up, the mother gave her attention to one daughter, who would in turn be something she didn't want. And the older daughter, really resentful of the mother. It seems like she's not angry at her younger sister, which is good, but very resentful of her mother, and I can see why. And they'll be arguing in the car, and the mother will say some horrible things like, of course I focused on her. She was the beautiful one with potential. And the older daughter is driving. Don't distract the driver. So the mother distracts the driver. The older daughter accidentally gets in a car wreck, and we get a horrifying and gruesome image. A road sign flies into the back window and peels off some of the younger daughter's face, and we get an absolutely gruesome and horrifying image of a bit of face with an eyeball hanging from this road sign. The rest of the imagery in this comic is super iconic and stuff, but still, that first early sign that we're going into body horror, that's pretty messed up. But anyway, they take her to the hospital, and the doctor says, there's something very strange going on. It turns out, underneath her face was another face, and he put her through an x-ray, and the younger daughter's like an onion. New layers of herself grew over herself, and it's just younger versions of her face, under her face, under her face, under her face. There's literally layers of old versions of her under her, and it just got peeled away. So you see like half of her face is her current face, and half of her face is her face like from 2 years ago. Such a crazy, weird concept, and they of course begin to suspect that this is because of the curse. When the father disturbed the grave of a baby, his own daughter got a curse that caused her to have this layering effect. Downright creepy and gruesome, and of course they try to cover it up. They get her out of the hospital, they don't want special treatment, and they try to take her home and hide all this. It's a really just I love Junji Ito's surreal ideas, and there is some meaning here too, because the mother is clinging on to the past, does think of the daughter in terms of what she thought of her back then, and finding out that, there is an older version of her underneath her, and thinking, it's the whole case of, thinking of someone how they were in the past and not accepting that they have changed, and the idea that history is real but also inaccessible. It is a whole lot in the mother's psychology, and I won't spoil where this is going, but it does lead to an intense moment at the end. But like I hinted at earlier, in the original comic, it was so much more intense and so much grueling, and because it goes a little faster, it just goes a little too quick, feels a little too easy, doesn't feel near as intense and creepy and awful as it does in the comic, and I do wish it did feel more grueling, So yeah, the ending visuals here just being too complex don't really translate as well as they could have, but it still is an iconic story with iconic meaning and a really good idea. It's just not the best adaptation of it. Anyway, after that, the thing that drifted ashore, we get a bit of an opening, nice animation of underwater sea creatures and a little bit of talking. But that being said, it is different than the original comic. This sort of opening shot of deep sea animals in the comic was more of a memory of the main character going into a sort of a zoo and seeing the underwater animals, and it's much more like a real memory than it is fancy animation, and I think it, again, does work way better in the comic, because we all have those memories of going to the zoo, seeing the animals, and man, yeah, the underwater exhibits. Some people are big into underwater stuff, but those were always so creepy. The weird stuff that lives in the ocean. The ocean is terrifying, and almost every single sea monster in some form does exist deep down in the ocean. It's super creepy stuff, so I like it more seeing it as this memory like in the comics than just fun little animation in the show, but yeah, it just seems so much more real. It's hard to describe. But anyway, we cut to the present day, and something is washed ashore. A big whale sea serpent-like thing, and it's got these feelers because it was so far in the depths of the ocean. It had these little bulbs on its face that it would somehow use for sensing, and also it's implied that it had some form of bioluminescence. And the creature was, the face was super complex, but you have to kind of steer around that in animation, as I said. The scientists are trying to push back the crowd because this is an important discovery and we have to study it before it decays. And in the crowd, there are two people, your main guy and this girl. And the girl says she didn't want to come here, and the guy says, yeah, I didn't either, but I felt strangely compelled. And the girl will tell why she doesn't like the ocean, because they both don't like the ocean. And it turns out her husband, or fiance, I guess, died in the water because he was on a boat and the boat sank and everybody drowned. However, at this point in time, the scientist finds something strange in the creature, and it does lead to a big messed up reveal. A big, messed up, and again, complicated to draw reveal that worked out better in the comic. So yeah, adaptation is your key thing here. But this is a good candidate for a Junji Ito asymmetric double episode. A lot of Junji Ito stories really need time to breathe. This is just a quick, weird concept, and it is one that you can do in a really short amount of time. So this was a perfect choice for a B-side in an episode like this, and I have to say, the original concept, something washes ashore, here's this messed up idea I had, quick in, out, fun adventure, aren't the oceans absolutely terrifying? And yeah, it does that well enough, but again, It's just the complexity of the illustration, and it's something that both stories had. So in turn, I want to say both of them were absolutely iconic, great Junji Ito stories, but didn't super translate well. And like I said earlier, that's always going to be an issue with Ito translations, but really just adapting any media into another media. It usually works out better in its source material and hardly ever does come out better. But that being said, it's usually something I think it's fine. It's something I can usually forgive. And for the most part, I do, because I understand the challenge behind it. But that being said, there were just a few lackluster moments in here because of how complex it was. So I don't want to say it's a terrible episode, but it definitely is one that suffers an adaptation more than the other ones do. But overall, it's still fine because we do have these concepts from Ito that are still strong enough. It's one that you can definitely see the adaptation not quite taking, But anyway, still liking the series so far, still pretty fun, and I think the next episode is actually the Tomie episode, so really looking forward to another installment of Junji Ito's most iconic character there. Anyway, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You really are helping the channel out. I'll leave a relevant playlist on the bottom. This should be my Junji Ito playlist, where you can see my reviews for all the past episodes, as well as a US manga guide if you're curious about what books you can officially read stuff in. Sadly, none for this one. But you can also see my review for a whole lot of Junji Ito's books, as well as Junji Ito unboxings for things like this Junji Ito Pocket Curse from Uzumaki, and this acryl display. I have unboxings for both of those in this playlist as well. Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Relevant playlist, Junji Ito playlist on the bottom. Have a good day now.